Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys are all having a fantastic day. Today's upload is going to be an episode on me focusing on the southeastern United parts of the United States. And basically I'll be discussing why those parts may be cold and snowy this year. And I did make a video, I think my El Nino discussion basically was me talking about how those areas may be snowier and colder, but I just wanted to make this video specially dedicated to that, just in case someone was watching or saw my El Nino discussion and was like, oh yeah, I don't really want to watch that, and they were preferred to watch something that's directly focused on this. So it's gonna be a little bit like that video, so maybe a little bit repetitive at some points, but hopefully you will enjoy it. Hopefully you will like the video. Again, I always say this at the beginning of my video. If you would like to subscribe, if you'd like to like the video, it's up to you. It really helps on my channel, so thank you for that. So first off, we'll look at the ENCO recent evolution, current status and predictions. So this was updated, I think, October 1st, 2018 by the Climate Prediction Center, which is run by National Weather Service, which is run by NOAA. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. This is like 32 pages long, so this will take a very long time if I were to go through this whole thing. And right now, what I just want to say is, you can see there is a 50 to 55% chance of an El Nino during the northern hemisphere fall, and a 65 to 70% during the winter. So an El Nino is fairly likely. There could be something different, like an El Nino Modoki, and that is still considered an El Nino, but the other, I would say the other 30 to 35% of this ENCO or ENSO potentially being something else is either in neutral, staying neutral, or maybe a La Nina. But that's, like I said in my previous video, that is basically not gonna, like, the chance of that happening are very small. So I would say more likely it's either between an El Nino Modoki or an El Nino at this point. I wouldn't even say a neutral. I think these chances are a little bit low. So we go down here. This just shows you a bunch of evolutions of it in the past couple of weeks. This is the different regions that the ENCO or the ENSO region is divided into. Sorry, I keep saying ENCO. It's just, I know it's ENSO. I've just been saying that my whole life, and it's hard to get out of that. So these are the couple different regions. You can see the only region that has been below average in the past couple of weeks, or has been dropping the latest weekly SST, which is sea surface temperatures. The Nino 1 and 2 are those region, or I should say, yeah, that region is the only region that is below average. It is 0.3 negative Celsius, has dropped in the past couple of weeks. The other ones have been warming up, indicative of an El Nino. But this is a little bit interesting, and this may be actually indicating an El Nino Modoki. So I will be showing you how that could be indicating of an El Nino Modoki in a minute. So this is again what it currently looks like. You can see there's a lot of warm temperatures up north, but in that El Nino ENSO region where the El Nino should be developing, there's not much warmth. I will show you the current SST in just a minute. So we go down, there's a lot of information about several different things, but again, I won't be showing you to this because I have other things to show you, and this doesn't necessarily relate to the video as much. So this just goes to show you, this just shows us what is characterized. Like an El Nino is ONI greater than. So in El Nino, the waters need to be at least 0.5 degrees above Celsius, and La Nina is the opposite. But this year, it's I would say 99% El Nino, the chances of that happening, compared to a La Nina. But now the chances of an El Nino Modoki versus a weak or moderate El Nino, that's probably the biggest, fighting, biggest concern right now, biggest difference, biggest question right now. So we go down again, there's a lot more information, and this is basically showing us what the previous years, the past 12 years, either they have been El Ninos or La Ninos, and you can see that we have been in a neutral phase for quite a bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if say around this time frame right here we would be developing an El Nino. So again, this is just a chart showing you ENCO neutral is favored through August through October, and then El Nino favored thereafter. So The chances for an El Nino developing at this point after October are fairly high. I would say up to 70%, like they were saying right here. I would even say 80 to 90, to be honest with you. I think they're a little bit underdoing this, and there's a reason for this. This is because the current SSTs have been actually fairly not changing much, and only in the past couple of weeks when I showed you those Nino's regions and they were like positive 0.6, positive 0.6. That has only happened in the past couple of weeks. The waters have only started now to warm up, so that is that. And then you could see again, the models are predicting an El Nino to form, but this is basically the strength of an El Nino. And as you could see, these three models, the statistical average, DYN average, and CPC console, are all showing an El Nino under 1 for the majority of this time period, which would be indicative of a weak, very weak to moderate El Nino. Actually, I wouldn't even include the moderate El Nino in there. It's just a weak El Nino, and I'll show what that all means and what that is just a minute. So, if you're just wondering and you don't even know what an El Nino is, El Nino impacts something like this. So typical El Nino pattern, just typical El Nino. You can see warm across the north, dry across the Midwest, wet and cool across the south, and the northeast is kind of like this question mark zone depending on the strength of a typical or the strength of an El Nino. So I'll show you what that means in just a minute, but you could see I'll show you what that means what are the differences between a typical El Nino and a weak to moderate El Nino, which we would be experiencing this year most likely, if not in Modoki El Nino. So with a typical El Nino, you can see the jet streams way up to the far to the north, so that cold air wouldn't be allowed to enter in, and that tropical jet is going a little bit further up to the north, bringing wet and cooler conditions for the south. So I brought up the topic of an El Nino Modoki forming already a couple of times, and you can see that during an El Nino, we experience something like this with this SST, the sea surface temperatures. Even though this is in the oceans, this is just still considered SST, sea surface temperatures. And for looking at the whole Pacific Ocean, these warm waters are on the eastern side of it. That's why it's called an eastern-based El Nino, and that's what an eastern-based El Nino usually looks like. And then during an El Nino Modoki, you can see that the warm waters are more central-based, which is also called a central-based El Nino. And as I was showing you that one region that Nino 1 and 2 were cooling off, that's why that could be bringing some signs that an El Nino Modoki may be forming. Because let's go back to that PowerPoint presentation. Let's go way back to the top. And going up here, you can see Nino 1 and 2 are falling below average, and during an El Nino Modoki, we have that area below average. So that may be indicative of a Modoki trying to form. Very interesting pattern at this point. It's very tough to call, but if we do have a Modoki or a weak or strong El Nino, either case, the southeast will be fairly, the south and the eastern part of the United States will be fairly favorable for snow and cold. So now I'd like to show you the impacts of an El Nino Modoki if it were to be forming. You can see wetter than normal across the south and wetter across the east. And again, I'm focusing on the south and east in this video. So wetter than normal, and I'll show you the temperature departure in just a minute. Just keep this in mind. The U.S. rainfall anomalies during the winter for Central Pacific El Nino, which in other words, like I explained, is an El Nino Modoki, is wetter than normal for much of these states. During an El Nino, I think a regular El Nino, yes, a regular El Nino, you can see the south and the southeast are not necessarily above average, but the thing is that this year we most likely won't be experiencing this. Even though it will be considered an El Nino, it's a weak to moderate to not strong, weak to moderate, very weak to moderate El Nino this year. So, if you're wondering still I didn't show you yet. If you're wondering what a weak to moderate El Nino looks like, typical impacts on winter, you can see it looks something like this. So that does a little bit correlate with the El Nino Modoki, as I was showing you the El Nino Modoki impacts, or Modoki. Wetter than normal if it were to form across these areas, the south, southeast, and the northeast. And during a weak to moderate El Nino, we have basically the same thing. So that's what I was saying. Either way, I think this year we have a fairly good setup for some good snows across the southeast, the south, and the east. And this, the different setup during a weak El Nino has a jet stream ridging all the way up into British Columbia, then sending itself back down, allowing some of this cold air to actually come down into parts of the Northeast and producing some snowstorms. Now, will this cold be enough? Will this cold sometimes go all the way down to the south? We don't know, and that's the thing. I think the Southeast will be seeing lots of rain this winter. If that cold area is in place, you'll be seeing quite a bit of snow or above average. Comparing it to a regular El Nino, you can see the jet streams up there and not necessarily down, all the way down into central Midwest and central Northeast. So there are some differences with this that are actually fairly major and will lead to fairly big differences. So now I was showing you with the El Nino Modoki how it was wetter across the United States, the southeastern, eastern, and southern United States was wetter. Well, now this is what a typical El Nino Modoki looks like in terms of temperatures. What I did here, this is what I created myself, and I just compiled a bunch of El Nino Modoki years, November to March, and compiled them in one map. And you can see the cold air basically is overlaid in those areas where it is above average precip. So when you have cooler conditions and above average precip in the same areas, that typically would mean more snow. There are quite a bit of other factors, but going off that rule, we could be seeing some more snow if the El Nino Modoki happens. Now, with the weak to moderate El Nino, it looks something like this. And again, the weak to moderate El Nino was this thing right here that I was showing you. And this year, that's what we're expecting most likely to be forming. I would say even higher chances than an El Nino Modoki. And not nearly as cool across those areas. Did the same thing, took a bunch of weak to moderate El Ninos, and I compiled their winter months. You can see it is slightly cooler. It's definitely not warmer. It's slightly cooler, but not necessarily as cool as the El Nino Modoki. But again, the precip is definitely there when it comes to being above average. So this still would produce, I think, abundant amount of snow across, especially the Northeast. Maybe not as much as the El Nino Modoki. If you live in the southern parts of the United States, like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, that southeast area, then maybe, Florida, parts of northern Florida, because southern Florida, it would need to be really below average in order for them to see snow. But I don't think they've ever really seen any snow down there that was major. But northern Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, those states, I think have a better shot with an El Nino Modoki rather than weak to moderate El Nino. But those things at this point are the two main things that may happen. So I would say they have a fairly good chance. If we go to now, this is just an El Nino as to comparison, which will be forming, but again, it depends on the strength of an El Nino and the type of the El Nino. Taking in just a regular El Nino, I just took in a bunch of years that were El Ninos, November to March, and you could see above average across the north and slightly below average across the south, not by much. So this video, I don't have a map to show you at the end where I think the southeast will be the coldest. I'm just saying that in general, in the southeast, the south, even areas as far west as Texas, Oklahoma, and as far north as Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island can be seeing above average snowfall and pretty good amounts of snow. So that is that for today's video. That was my reasoning behind this. Hopefully I made this a little bit clearer for you. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned something new. And I'll see you all guys all in the next episode.